So it's being reported that the U.S. is now sending even more military equipment and soldiers to the Caribbean. As you know, we already have a whole bunch of warships down there. We have, I think, 15,000 soldiers. Of course, the Trump regime has been blowing up over 20 different fishing boats, over 86 people now, I believe, killed in these strikes. And look, they're on the record as basically saying we want to do regime change in Venezuela. That's very out there. That's very clear that this is the goal. They literally gave the Nobel Peace Prize to the Cuban opposition leader when this woman had begged for Netanyahu to overthrow Maduro. This woman had begged Trump to do war against her own country. So a shame on the Nobel Committee for doing that, by the way. This woman's a warmongering psychopath, as everybody with a brain knows. And now they want to try to get rid of Maduro and then force her in there, all the while pretending like we support democracy and freedom. Meanwhile, it would be a dictatorship we'd be setting up. But Trump was in the White House the other day, and yet again, he reiterated, get ready, because attacks on land in Venezuela are coming. Listen to this.
But 96% of the drugs coming in by water, every one of those boats you see get shot down, you just saved 25,000 American lives.
Number one, that's totally made up. Number two, there's no evidence these are even drug boats. Number three, even if they were drug boats, you'd have to seize the boat, seize the drugs, and arrest the individuals in question. So this is just, it's so crazy that people just let him say shit. They let him say anything. The media just stands there and lets him say shit. This is crazy. He's defending an obvious war crime.
We knocked out 96% of the drugs coming in by water, and now we're starting by land, and by land is a lot easier, and that's going to start happening.
So he just said we're going to start by land. Terrifying. Terrifying. Also, I should note for the record, every time we talk about this, literally none of the fentanyl, none of it comes from Venezuela. Less than 10%. I even read less than 5% of the drugs that come into this country come from Venezuela. So it's just totally made up. It's a totally made up pretext for war. But now, ready for this? This gets crazy because now we have Sky News actually came out and told the truth and explained how this is definitely about oil. Watch this.
Donald Trump is insisting that the main reason he's interested in Venezuela, the main reason the US is kind of looking at tankers off the coast of Venezuela comes back to drugs, the trade, the smuggling of illegal drugs out of Venezuela. But what if it's not just that? Maybe there's something else going on. What if it's partly about oil? Now, on the surface, you might be thinking, why does America even need Venezuelan oil? And I can kind of understand your point, because if you look at just total oil production, look, this is up until 2005, the US was there, Venezuela was there, Saudi Arabia was there. But as you probably know, since then, everything has changed. Look, American output has gone through the roof, way above Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela has gone basically to the floor. And that's kind of post-Chavez, Maduro. They're one of the minnows now, I think 21st biggest producer in the world. So again, that question, why should America care? Well, in the US, that big rise is largely down to this. It's down to the shale revolution. So you've got fracking all around the US producing extraordinary amounts of crude oil. And here's where we get to the interesting bit. Because when you're thinking about crude oil, maybe you're just thinking about, well, look, barrels of oil. It's all the same, isn't it? Well, actually, no. So if you kind of look at crude oil, there are various different types of crude in different parts of the world. There's actually kind of various different ways you can categorize it. But one way you can look at it is look at the kind of density. So you're basically looking at how thick that crude is. And when I say thick, I mean literally how thick. This is showing you global production broken down by the density of that oil. And so you've got the kind of medium stuff. And this is probably, if you've got kind of image in your mind of what crude oil looks like, it's a bit like this, it's kind of black, but it's not too viscous, it flows around. But there's other stuff as well. So this is light crude. And it kind of almost looks like a smoothie, doesn't it? And that's the same stuff. This is still crude oil, but down to the kind of geological and the biological conditions in the ground when it was being formed, hundreds of millions of years ago, it comes out looking a bit different. And so that's light. You've also got heavy stuff. And it's kind of relatively small in global production, but this is gloopy, super viscous stuff, heavy oil. So heavy, medium, light. Remember that. And remember also, the key thing here is you get it out of the ground, it may look like that, but ultimately you still need it to go into, someone's car, or indeed, be turned into chemicals. Basically, you need to process it. And that processing, that happens in places like this, in refineries. And there are refineries all over the world, of course. There are refineries all over the US as well. There's kind of more than 100 of them. And if we kind of look at where those refineries are, well, so there's some in California. So the history in America, actually, historically, a lot of the early Californian oil, that was the heavy, gloopy stuff. And if you look at kind of some of the refineries in America, so here are some of the refineries. There's one in LA there. These are the 10 biggest. You've got some up here around kind of towards Canada. We'll kind of come to that in a second. But a lot of them are down there, kind of Texas, Louisiana, on the coast. And here's the critical thing. These refineries are primarily set up for heavy oil, for taking that gloopy stuff and turning it into gasoline and all of the other different products. But here's where things get interesting. And remember that chart I showed you a moment ago, the one which showed kind of shale oil and how it kind of went through the roof? The oil that's generally produced with shale oil, the fracking oil, that comes out of the ground mostly in the light form. So it's the smoothie. It's sometimes actually even clear. It comes out of the ground clear rather than black. And that's the majority of American production right now. Shale oil tends to be light stuff. And actually that's kind of going back 10 years. Look at where we are now. Look at those bars. In the last few years, the amount of light oil being produced in the US has gone up and up and up, and the amount of kind of heavy stuff has gone down. But back to those refineries. They need to be fed. If America's going to have gasoline, it needs to feed those refineries with heavy oil. So if you look at the kind of imports coming into America, in recent years, even though America is producing so much oil, more oil than it ever produced before, it still needs to suck in loads of oil from overseas. And the type of oil we're talking about, it used to be, it's mostly heavy crude. It used to be only 12%. So only 12% of imports were heavy, gloopy crude. Now, it's about 70%. So 70% of the oil coming into America, which it needs to basically keep its economy going, is heavy crude. And where does heavy crude come from? Well, here are some of the big countries where you find most of it. It's Canada and Venezuela. There's one other I'll come to in a second, which we'll come back to. But it's Canada and it's Venezuela where you get most of this heavy crude oil, which is why, back to think about where those refineries are. They're mostly set up, you've got some in the north there to get heavy oil coming out of Canada, and you've got some around the kind of Louisiana and elsewhere and Texas to get that heavy oil that comes in from Venezuela. That was kind of the way they were set up. And it's really expensive to rebuild these things. You can't just chuck out a refinery very easily overnight. Some came from Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico as well, and that's pretty heavy too. So that's the picture in America. And the upshot is, even though America's producing more and more oil, the imports, this is showing you imports of oil into America, are still really high. And if you break down those imports by the country that stuff is coming from, well, there's Venezuela, and it used to be a decent slug, actually more coming from Venezuela just about than from Canada, just at the turn of the millennium. But now look at what's happened since. Right now, Canada has gone from 15% of all of the US imports of oil to 61%. 61%, and Venezuela is basically next to nothing. But here's what's tantalizing, and here's the reason I think that a lot of people are looking towards Venezuela and thinking, well, there's more to this than just drugs. Look at total oil reserves around the world. The higher these bars are, the more oil there is in the ground, so that hasn't yet been taken out of the ground. So there you've got Saudi, Iran, Iraq, all of the usual suspects. But the biggest of all, and this is according to various different sources, the biggest of all is Venezuela. And what's that oil? It's the heavy, tarry stuff that you might well want to put into those American refineries. And there is really only one other place in the world that has a kind of serious amount of heavy oil other than Canada and Venezuela. And lo and behold, guess where that is? It's Russia. All of which is to say, it matters what kind of oil America needs. It's worth just delving into these kind of nuances because that helps you understand a little bit more about the backstory of geopolitics.
When I tell you that in 2001 and 2002 and even 2003 and 4, nobody on TV, nobody was saying, oh, the Iraq war is for the oil. I mean it. Bush and Cheney did a multi-year buildup, a propaganda front to try to convince people, look, to go to war against Saddam Hussein is patriotic. He might attack us. He helped bin Laden do 9/11. So the whole country was basically duped into thinking this is actually defensive to go to war in Iraq. Nobody on TV in those early days said this war is for oil. Here we are, before they even do the land attacks in Venezuela, and you have Sky News going, oh, this is about the oil. Because the drug story doesn't even add up. It doesn't even make sense. Everybody knows. Everybody. Even if you don't even know that much about this topic, oh yeah, the cocaine comes from Colombia, right? None of the fentanyl comes from Venezuela, and that's like the most deadly one that's out there now. You know this. And so the propaganda falls apart immediately. Trump just pardoned a guy who sent $20 billion worth of cocaine, smuggled that into this country. The Honduran fascist who he just pardoned. So you can't say, I'm going to pardon a guy who sent $20 billion worth of cocaine into America while also saying we're going to topple Maduro because he's sending drugs into America. That's insane. Everybody can see through it. It's so transparent. So this pathetic attempt to try to, oh yeah, it's definitely drugs. People go, no, it's not. And then you get people talking. They didn't do the all systems go propaganda effort. And what they're going to find out is there's a reason why Bush and Cheney felt like they had to do the propaganda blitz to dupe people into wanting to go to Iraq. Because if you don't do the propaganda blitz and you just go to war, people will fucking revolt. People will not stand for it. Yes, will there be some MAGA idiots who fall in line? Of course. When Trump bombed Iran, MAGA Republicans, 95% of them said, I support this now. And like 70 to 75% of traditional Republicans support it. Yes, the warmongers will be warmongers, but that's not enough. You're going to, right off the bat, you're going to have 65% of the country go, excuse me, what the fuck are you doing? What are we doing? Why are we spending money on this? Why are we wasting American lives on this? What's the purpose of another war? Didn't you run against the wars? What is this? And so it's backfire. It's already backfiring right in front of our eyes. Now, they got the weapons. They got the military. They got the power. They're going to do what they're going to do, but they are absolutely losing the country at a record clip. And there will be consequences for that. You think the backlash was bad in these last few elections that we saw? The special elections? Boy, you better buckle up. You ain't seen nothing yet. If he goes war with Venezuela and actually tries to do regime change and lets Eric Prince, his war criminal buddy, fucking illegally occupy another country and start stealing their minerals and their natural resources and their oil, you have Representative Salazar, that psychopath, on TV saying all the time, this is great for the American oil companies because we're just going to take the oil, bro. That's what we're going to do. Like, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. So, now you have the media just saying it before the first bombs are even dropped in Venezuela proper. You have the media going, oh, this has nothing to do with drugs. This is all about the oil. And like, what happens when America is very open about the fact now, yes, we're a mobocracy. You know, we're a gangster cartel government. That's what this is. This is no like freedom, democracy, good governance, any semblance of like competence. That's all gone. It's all gone. And now it's just like naked, raw power, ambition, law of the jungle type shit. And that has consequences, y'all. That has tremendous, tremendous consequences. And the world is abandoning us because we abandoned them. We launched a trade war against them. We fucking stabbed our allies in the back time and time again. Inflation's going up. Unemployment's going up. The economy is crumbling. We're warmongering all over the place. We're rounding up innocent immigrants and sending them to concentration camps. Trump's invading the U.S. with the U.S. military. And now everybody's onto it. And now even the media is telling the truth, which I'm telling you, the regime is collapsing at a record pace, unlike anything I've ever seen. We're not even through a full year, and he's already blown all of his political capital. So, Democrats, wakey, wakey. When the media can even come out here and tell the truth, maybe you should too. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.